What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Loot Drop. And on today's episode, we're joined by a very special guest. He is my brother in arms when it comes to being an advocate for Final Fantasy. We absolutely both love this game, and I think we both have some very unique thoughts on this game. Today, we're reviewing Final Fantasy 16 in full spoiler discussion. So if you haven't played the game, the fuck are you doing here? Get out of here. Go play the game, come back, watch it, and let's see if any of our thoughts match up. Dadman, man, this game. Um, First of all, I think we both were in agreement. It was a fantastic game.
Yes.
It really was. Great all the way around. But I told you this already. My biggest issue with it is I think it was a great game. I just don't think it was a good Final Fantasy game. I think there were
Right.
things about it that I really struggled with. With it carrying the Final Fantasy name and title, and we'll talk about some of the negatives of what we had in the game first, but some of the positives in the game for me, and I'll open it up to you here in a second. I thought that this was very, very great character development with our core cast of characters through the game. Maybe better than what we've gotten in any recent Final Fantasy game, or potentially ever, if I'm being honest. Right. So I thought Clive was a fantastic antagonist. I absolutely loved Clive. I didn't think I was going to because I got to tell you, young Clive with the fucking Karen haircut almost took me out of it. Young Clive was fucking dope, but older Clive, man, very complex character and very like so much depth to him. Absolutely loved him. Joshua, his brother, once we got past young Joshua, who was I didn't think that Square Enix could do it, made someone more whiny than Tidus.
Yeah.
We got past that. Joshua, the adult, fantastic character. But man, my hero of the story, the character I want more from was Jill. I thought Jill was
Mm.
was now I think they did her dirty a little bit because and we'll get some of that here in a minute. But I thought the Jill character potentially could have been the best female character in all of Final Fantasy if they
Hmm.
hadn't dropped the ball in a couple areas. But I absolutely loved Jill. So for me, the character development was top notch. Coming off Expedition 33, I'm not going to compare the two games because they are two very drastically different games. But I will say,
Yes.
I do think I would have preferred this to have been turn-based combat over the action combat. But I did like some of the action sequences, like your when you had your what did they call them in the game? Was it Exions,
Icons.
icons? When you had your icons battling, man, it was like a huge kaiju,
Yeah.
movie
Yeah.
playing in front of you. I thought that was pretty cool and very cinematic. Um, and then I thought the visuals were honestly beautiful in this game. At first, I don't know what it was, but like my first 15, 20 minutes of the gameplay, I was a little bit taken back. I just kind of felt like I was like, this kind of looks gross to me. But once we got to the thick of the game, actually the visuals, I just thought they were really, really good. Especially when you started to look at like some of the non-playable parts of the game, like when you were
Hmm.
going on the map and you were deciding what location you wanted to go with, or when you were with that chick, that historian who was kind of going through and navigating or
Yeah.
narrating some of the stories and stuff like this. I loved the visual aspects of the game. And so there was a lot there to take away that I thought was really, really good. But let's start there with you. What were some of your key likes and takeaways from Final Fantasy 16?
I think the strongest point of this game was the acting. I mean Ben Starr, like he's so good, and this was the first game. This is the first game I played that I was exposed to Ben Starr, and he like hit it out of the park for me.
Yeah.
That's why like when I played E33, like I was so excited for him to like I knew he was in that game, but I didn't follow the game enough to like know which character he played. So when he wasn't in like the first act of the game, I was like, where the hell is Ben Starr? And then when we got Verso, I was like, okay, I get it. But I mean, this guy is just really good, and I like him too because he's also a really big Final Fantasy fan. So you could tell like he cared about his performance, and that's big. You know, those are big shoes to fill. Like to have a memorable protagonist in a Final Fantasy series, like you're going up to bat against a lot of like big characters. Like you know, you're talking about your Clouds, your Tidus, your Squalls, like your, even if you want to go like Vivi and Zidane from Final Fantasy IX, like there's a lot of really good memorable characters that people like, they just cherish them, right? So that's a big shoe to fill. And on top of that, because it's not your typical Final Fantasy game, like in structure, it wasn't an ensemble really. It was Clive, Jill, Joshua, and then like you had Sid for a little bit, and then Torgal is obviously not voice acted or whatnot, but like you had, that was like your main party was just basically Clive and Torgal for like the majority of the game. So he had to carry like the whole game on his back, and I think he did a great job. So I think, yeah, to answer your question, I think the strongest point of this game was the acting on both sides, the good guys, the bad guys, the ancillary characters in between. Whoever did the voice acting for Ultima like nailed it, because that dude was just like so monotonous and like didn't care about anything, but it was like so creepy.
It
And I
was
was just
so
like,
fucking.
oh yeah, it's like levels of, it's not like Seymour levels of creepy, but it was up there like with like, because Seymour was just more like creepy, like towards Yuna creepy, but like Ultima was definitely just more overall creepy. But I would say that was the strongest part of the game is the voice acting and the acting direction for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think so. For me, sometimes video game voice acting can get a little cheesy, especially in
Oh
your
yeah,
more dramatic moments. And again, spoiler for Final Fantasy 16, but when we first, when we actually get Joshua's death at the end of the game, when they're there in front of Ultima, or do we get Joshua's death? Who knows, right?
yeah. Who knows?
But after we got Joshua's death at the end, there at the end when he's fighting Ultima, um, it would have been very easy for Ben Starr's acting to be very cheesy and overly emotional at that moment. But I felt it. I felt it hit the spot, man. Like I felt like not only was I not taken out of the game because of the voice acting, I felt an emotional tug as as a brother and uh,
Yeah,
things like that with the performance he had. So I totally agree there. And I think, yeah, I tried to look up the name for who was voicing Ultima, but I couldn't find it quickly enough. But whoever that person was, yeah, Ultima was fucking creepy, man.
yeah. He was creepy.
And I honestly, I think he was one of my. I would have to really think about this. Clearly, Sephiroth is my number one villain of all time in a Final Fantasy game. I think Kefka has got to be up there too, right? But I think
Yeah,
Ultima, man, I think Ultima might crack my top three. I'd have to put some thought into it, but yeah, I totally agree with you on all that. But I will say this, going into some of the things that I wasn't happy with, and this is the part that made it not feel like Final Fantasy to me, was you had already mentioned about the ensemble of cast, but not really a party that you go through in the game. That was part of it that took me out of it. And what I hated about it was because I understand that this was Clive's story. I get all that, but we've played other games where your main character is going through their story arc, and you still have an ensemble and a party with them. The problem that I had with it though was I would have been okay with the structure of the game had it not been for when they're at that gate and they're getting ready, like Clive and Joshua's back are against the wall. They're fighting their way through. It's the first time you really kind of go head to head with Ultima, and you end up getting teleported to like that weird world, and you find out some of the information about Ultima and stuff.
yeah.
When your back's against the wall, all of a sudden, what was Sid's daughter's name? Do you remember her name?
Sid's daughter.
Yeah,
I forget her name, but I know what you're talking
they
about.
come crashing in on the boat,
Yeah, yeah,
and then all of a sudden now everyone's there, right? Dion's there, Jill's there, like your whole cast, your whole party's there, and I'm like, okay, like I've noticed the absence of a party this entire game, but this is where it's done. Now everyone's been telling Clive, you don't have to go at it alone. Like
right.
you have people who love and care about you who can do this with you. Here they all are. We're all going to go head to head. We're going to go in, and regardless of how it ends up, we're going to face Ultima together. And then they were like, you know what? You all go ahead. We'll hold everyone off. And I'm like,
Yeah,
What
Yeah.
the hell? Why are you not going with him? And so now we do get a little bit of redemption on that because at the end you have um, Clive, Joshua, and Dion going to go fight Ultima. Which, man, I don't know if you caught this or not, but I felt like a lot of religious undertones to the story, and I felt that was almost very like Trinity ish, like God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, with them going to
Sure.
fight Ultima and stuff. And to me,
Sure.
I've always loved when Final Fantasy can find ways to kind of interweave religion into their storylines because I just find it fascinating. You know, Final Fantasy X being obviously the big one, but
Right.
I kind of love that a little bit. But yeah, the lack of a party kind of drove me crazy. So let me ask you this: was there enough of the supporting cast for you in this story, or did you feel like
Um. So I think it's a tough question for me to answer because halfway through the game, like I made the conscious decision to not treat this game as a Final Fantasy game because it didn't have the core elements of a Final Fantasy game to me. So I didn't kind of approach the situation like, oh, when am I gonna get my party? Or like I kind of took it as like a new experience. And I'm glad that I did because I think I was able to enjoy it a little more because I wasn't looking for those traditional like Square Enix Final Fantasy tropes. Like there are some like scattered around in the game, but like the non-party system, the non-turn-based stuff, the super linear structure, the lack of an airship or just the basic Final Fantasy mechanics that we've gotten so accustomed to. So I kind of treated it completely different. It was just a game to me, right? And I will say that I wish I was able to actually play with a party, not in the traditional sense, but maybe something like kind of how Final Fantasy VII Remake did it, where you have a party and you could kind of like switch in between them because it would have been so cool to like use Clive and then switch into Jill for like a combo and then have Torgal there because Torgal is just like Red 13. Like Red 13 is a playable character in Rebirth, right? But I would have also liked to have Joshua in there as well. I would have loved to have Dion in there as well because he's the only dominant that you fight that doesn't completely lose his power, right? And I think that's like not touched on enough. Like everyone's like, oh, Clive has to kill the dominant in order to absorb the power. No, he doesn't. That's just an unfortunate circumstance with Benedicta and Kupka.
Koopa? Koopa.
Yeah, the whatever his name, Kupka, whatever his name is, the big dude. And then with the king, like, yeah, he killed them as a circumstance of the battle and absorbed their powers, but they didn't have to die. Like Dion didn't die, and he just absorbed some of his power. And same thing with Jill. Like Jill just kind of surrendered her power willingly, right? So it would have been really cool to see like how they would have interacted with each other. I would have loved to have some playability with Sid. This is the greatest Sid we've ever gotten, and we didn't even get to like play with him. Like, what the fuck, But like outside of that, I still enjoyed the game, even though I would have liked for some more Final Fantasy ness to it. I still think it was Clive's story. Like he had to be the end all be all there. Like he was the chosen one or whatever for it. So it had to be him. Like I get it. I get the choice they made. Like I understand in a writer's perspective. Like yeah, it would have been nice to have the full party, but it was Clive's fight, and he knew it. The writers knew it, and then like towards the end of the game, I knew it too, and I was like, this is gonna end the way it's gonna end, and I'm not gonna be ready for it.
Yeah, I think. Well, first, let me just second. This is the greatest Sid we've gotten in any Final Fantasy. I think
Yeah.
it was phenomenal. I loved, and I was even okay with him dying. Like I
Yeah.
because of the way it happened and everything. To me it all worked. What didn't work, and this is just a weird one off for me, I guess, was I didn't really care for Clive taking Sid's name. Um,
Yeah.
I understood what they were going for. I just thought it was silly. But that aside, so I think that again, the character development, all these characters, despite not being a part of an active party, all had very flushed out storylines and story
Hmm.
arcs, right? And I think you look at Jill. She kind of gets her revenge story a little bit in there, and her her redeeming like arc for the mistakes she had made in the past and things that she was kind of forced to do. You get Dion's story arc that kind of gets flushed out. To me, I think his story arc was probably the best second to Clive, if I'm being honest. Just
Mhm.
from where he started to where he ended up in the end of the game, and even Joshua. There were a couple of times I was really frustrated through the game of like, Joshua, why don't you just let Clive know you're there? Like I felt like the reveal took too long to happen in the game between them two for us to know so long that Joshua was still alive. Like that was the part that
Right.
was weird. We knew for like 10 hours of the game Joshua was still alive, but yet he doesn't go to Clive. But all those are nitpicky things. My biggest issue with the game is, to me, I think that they had an MVP in Jill, that I think that they dropped the ball on at the end of the game, because I understand that she gave up her powers willingly. I understand that. I have no problem with that. It was a little weird to me, like them washing up on the beach and having to be naked and all that kind of stuff. Like it, it all just was
Yeah.
like, okay, I get it. Mature tones, I understand. Um, I didn't have any problem with her giving up her powers. It just, to me, it this was probably a bad analogy, but it felt like what Marvel did to the Hawk in the last couple of Avengers movies. We went from Hawk being
Sure. That's
their
fair.
option
That's fair.
to all of a sudden they just nerfed them,
Yeah.
they were
That's fair.
irrelevant to the story, and I hated that. But also, I love Torgal. I got to tell you, Torgal is probably my favorite animal of any Final Fantasy game, and that includes Red 13. Really
Yeah.
the heart and soul of the game to me. So character story arcs, even Torgal fucking had his like big MVP moment.
Yeah.
And
That was such a cool moment too.
it was awesome. So now obviously this game's had a lot of Game of Thrones tones to it.
Yeah.
And you said you had your thoughts as to why. To me, I was fine with it. You got to pick a lane, and I had no problem with the lane that they picked with this Final Fantasy game. My issue again was just that it just didn't feel like Final Fantasy to me. But what do you think went into the
Yeah.
decision to give this more of that Game of Thrones type feel to it? Our first Final Fantasy mature rated content game. Like, what do you think was the reason for that?
I think it was honestly just like a sign of the times. Final Fantasy fans are older, right? So I think like millennials, so us, like people in their mid 30s to early whatever 30s and 40s, like early 40s. I think we're the youngest generation of Final Fantasy fans that actually grew up with Final Fantasy.
Yeah,
Like I feel like younger Final Fantasy fans right now are introduced to the game from somebody who played it when they were younger. But I think like our generation is like the last like real generation that like grew up with it. So I think it's just a sign of like the game is maturing with its audience. But also too, like Game of Thrones was really big. I never watched it. I couldn't get into it, but Game of Thrones was like a really big show at the time. And on the gaming side of it, like Dark Souls games, so like Souls likes, so like Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, like a lot of those games like Sekiro, where there's parry mechanics and like fighting inputs matter. A lot of those games were like they were like big. Like everybody wanted to have like their own Souls like game. So I think Square Enix kind of took those things and like threw them together. They were like fans of Game of Thrones and they wanted a more mature tone, which perfectly lined up with that like medieval king and queen hunt down the castle type shit. But then also like the whole Souls like dodge parry roll combat. I think they just kind of meshed everything together and we're like, here, we're just gonna slap a coat of paint on it and call it Final Fantasy and you know, that's it. But I think they did that because most of the efforts went into like remake and rebirth and they just felt like they had to get a main title out. So I think Final Fantasy 16 just kind of got the short end of the stick because the baby project was the Final Fantasy 7 remake and rebirth. But with that being said, I still enjoyed the game. Like I still think it was a well made game. It was well written. It was a great story. But to me, even though I enjoyed the game, it's it is a Final Fantasy game only in title. It's not a Final Fantasy game to me in like any of its mechanics or any of its tropes or themes. But I did enjoy the game. I just think it was just a sign of the times, and that's why they made it.
So I will. I'll hit this point, and then we'll kind of start talking a little bit about the ending and any kind of thoughts on what they were going for. Um, I really put a lot of thought into this, and I think that I agree with you. I think clearly you saw that there was a lack of attention to this game because of the attention given to Final Fantasy VII. And my wife and I, she's watched me play it a little bit, but she doesn't quite know all the storylines of Final Fantasy VII. So we decided to go through and just watch like cutscenes that like when they put them into a movie, going through the storyline, and you can just see the difference between Final Fantasy
Mm-hmm.
VII remake that came out 5-6 years ago to what
Mm-hmm.
this game is now that just recently came out last year. And there's a noticeable difference. There's an attention to detail in Final Fantasy VII that you're not getting here, and I think that that's a mistake on Square Enix's part. I understand wanting to put out a main title game, but I think if you put out mediocre main title games that are shitty and that hurt your brand,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you're not going to be successful or not have the kind of success that you're really vying for. That being said, I think Final Fantasy not Final Fantasy Seven, excuse me. I think Final Fantasy in general, Square Enix. I think they have a real issue on their hands. Um, I think that they are slowly starting to find themselves less and less relevant in the gaming community, and do I think that all of a sudden, like tomorrow, people's going to forget about them? No, because once this third installment, Final Fantasy VII comes out, it's going to make
Yeah.
all the money. People are going to love it, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But when was the last time we looked at a Final Fantasy new title? Not take the remake aside. We looked at a Final Fantasy new title and we thought to ourselves, man, that pushed forward the gaming industry. That pushed forward
10.
storytelling. It's been a while, man. In my opinion,
Yeah. 10.
10,
Final
yeah,
Fantasy 10.
100%.
Yeah, that was the last one.
And
Mhm.
you're talking about, dude, that was 3 generations ago, console generations ago. Um, and I think that they are still looking at and hanging their hat on the success that they had during that time, which is fine. That's great. Like we're always going to be thankful for those titles. But you've moved away from things like turn based to get more to
Mhm.
action combat, and the action combat in this game was terrible. I'm sorry. The visuals were really cool, but I found myself doing combos in this game and then losing where I was because there was just so much visual noise in front of me that
Yeah.
it got in the way. And I think that I really do, man. I really have some main concerns that once we get to Final Fantasy 17, whenever that day comes, if they don't do something to swing for the fences on it. This was a very safe game. They put out a very safe game with Final Fantasy 7.
Correct.
It was a good game, but it was a safe game. So if they don't do anything with Final Fantasy 17, excuse me, to swing for the fences here, and to continue to evolve gaming as a whole, I think they're going to look at 18 and 19 and they're going to see a decline in their sales. And at one point, I was like, "Oh, we're going to get to Final Fantasy 50, right? Like, when is this train going to actually end? It's going to end pretty fucking quick if they don't continue to be innovative." And it's ironic that they would find themselves in that position when their whole company history started on a gamble with Final Fantasy in 1987 that changed gaming history forever, and to find themselves less and less relevant on the impact it's making to the industry now, I think is a shame. And I'll probably do more of an editorial video on this because I'm still fleshing out all my thoughts. But man, that's what made this disappointing to me. And I think at minimum, you could have at least given it. I don't know how you feel about the music in this game. The music was fine. It
It was
was
all right.
okay to me. And I
It
think
didn't hit like it didn't hit me like, oh, this is
it didn't.
peak Final Fantasy music.
No, and what really took me off guard was one of the fights when you were fighting the Koopa guy or whatever. When he turns into that big fucking rock creature, we go from Final Fantasy like music to like this rock anthem that you're going through when you're
Yeah.
going through this battle, and it was a miss, man. And I gotta say, I again. great game, terrible Final Fantasy game, and if they don't step up
Yeah.
their progress, Final Fantasy 7 Part 3 I think is going to be great. They're putting a lot of it. This is their baby. It's going to be the last fucking one they have though if they don't get their shit together. You and I both, we're dying for what will never happen, a Final Fantasy 8 remake. Um,
Yeah, it's never gonna
I
happen.
don't want a remake anymore. I don't want a remake of anything. I want them to go to the drawing table and say, okay, let's put our focus on the future. Let's not look back at the past, and let's see what we can do with this new game, this new title to really change things. And I I hope they can, man. So I really do. Any thoughts about
Yeah.
anything I just said before we move into our conspiracy theories for the end?
Yeah, actually, like as you were talking, I was just thinking about because obviously, like I'm playing through the original Final Fantasy right now, and I was thinking about it, and if I was Square Enix, like I know they've had a lot of movement, like in their leadership and their directions have changed, and it's more about making money now. Um, but like the thing that bothers me is like Final Fantasy, the original, kind of built where they're at today, right? Like it has gotten them to where they're at today. Now, there's a lot of other great Square Enix RPGs like Bravely Default and I mean, I guess the Dragon Quest series is now also Square Enix. So like, there's a bunch of others, Square Enix RPGs that are really good, right? And they're bigger franchises too. So like, you have the Octopath Travelers and all that other stuff. But Final Fantasy really is like the defining like RPG of like forever. Like it changed the game, right? And I wish they would like really consider like, you know what? Let's just kind of get Rebirth out or get the third part of Rebirth out, and then let's stop. Like Final Fantasy 16, let's just stop the train there and do like a soft reset, like do Rebirth, give the third part of Rebirth its whole like tour, its whole like hype and everything, and then let the dust die down a little bit, and then come right back with like the next installment in the Final Fantasy series is just going to be called Final Fantasy. And then you, instead of doing numbered titles, just give them subtext like Final Fantasy, I don't know, the Crystal Quest or whatever. Like it doesn't have to be a numbered title. Like just kind of refresh it a little bit. But I definitely think they need to get back to the roots of what it means to be a Final Fantasy title. And that is turn-based combat, you know, um, some type of some type of like magic power, um, summons. Like that's what makes all those Final Fantasy, like the golden age of Final Fantasy, which was like 6 through 10. They all had the same exact tropes. Like everything had summons, everything had turn base, everything had materia or magic or something. Like it was all the same. Like it had the same kind of skeleton. And I think they need to get back to that. And this is why I think Clair Obscur Expedition 33 was such a movement of like the needle. I think that game coming out and doing as well as it did is going to open the eyes of a lot of people, and I'm for it. Like if Square Enix could get back on the horse and give us like a really great Final Fantasy game, turn-based, good story, like, and all with all the technology now, like I need them to start getting back into consideration for game of the year. Like if you have a Final Fantasy title that's not in contention for game of the year, it's probably not a good one. It's just not. So I need them to get back into that swing, into that type of mode. And I feel like with Clair Obscur just like turning the industry on its side, a non AAA title, indie studio, non full retail game, like you could buy it for $40 when it came out. It was free on Game Pass. Like that's unheard of nowadays, and I think it shows that as long as you put passion and good, care behind your projects, that's all we as consumers care about. Like, yeah, okay, cool, Final Fantasy, Square Enix, sure, long reputation, but your last like 5 games have sucked ass. Like, I'm not going to continue to support that. So
Yeah.
I hope that they kind of take a step back and refresh it.
So one of the things that they did do right in this game. So now that we're done shitting on Square Enix, I will say the ending of this game I
Oh yeah.
really loved. I did. Because first of all, no matter what your outlook on it and what the ending entailed, I think it was a satisfying ending, and I think that's difficult to do. Now, with that being said, I think that it left a lot to be, interpreted. It was an Inception style ending, if
Hell
you
yeah.
right, like the coin waver, like when it was spinning. And so you have some thoughts, man. And I've been dying. You haven't shared any of them with me. I've been dying to hear. So walk me through, Dad, man. What was
Okay.
the ending of this game?
So I enjoyed the ending. I thought the ending was great because it was an actual ending, right? Like, yes, there's some opening for interpretation, but it's a very Christopher Nolan type ending. But after the game was complete, like after I finished the game as a gamer, I kind of sat with it for a little bit, and then I went into like over analyze mode as like a person who enjoys writing and creating their own stories, and like my theory as to why this wasn't a Final Fantasy game per se is because chronologically speaking, it's the first one. So just entertain this for a second, right? So the biggest problem with this game is the lack of Final Fantasy elements, right? So there's no summons. Yes, you have your kaiju's, but there's no like actual summon mechanic. Um, there's no MP. Like you can't like you cast magic depending on what icon you have equipped, but you don't have an MP bar.
Yeah.
There's no turn-based combat. I guess there's crystals with like the mother crystals, but like the whole point of the game is you destroying the crystals to remove the use of magic when every other Final Fantasy game has been like restoring the crystals and then or using the crystals to use magic. So it's like the exact opposite of what all these other games want to do, right? So like you take that out, you take the party system out. So I was looking at all these things and I was just like, this is not like a Final Fantasy game, right? But what if it's like the first story of like the first Final Fantasy story, and then from there everything else comes out? Because now replaying the first Final Fantasy, their whole purpose of that story is to restore the crystals. So what if it's, generations and generations and generations after Clive, after Joshua, after all that, people are finally starting to restore the crystals because of whatever benefit that they could, get from that. Because Clive was the one who fucking destroyed them in the first place. So I was like, oh, what if like and then of course like it's the book at the end, right? It's just a story. Like, oh, you can make the interpretation that it was just a story, but what if to those people it was just a story, but what if somebody came across that and was like kind of like they're reading the Bible, right? Like I don't want to sound like blasphemous or anything, but like they're reading the Bible and they're like, yo, if this was like how it was back then, like how can we get back to this?
Okay.
And maybe they're using that as like their manuscript to bring everything back. And some of the consequences of restoring the crystals are the use of magic in a limited fashion because you have MP, and the use of summons. Summons didn't become a thing in Final Fantasy till Final Fantasy 3. So there's still repercussions of the crystals being completely restored. And then what if the big thing for me was like, because the way the dominance and the icons worked, like these were like physical manifestations of these creatures, right? So Clive with Ifrit, um, Jill with Shiva, and like, you get your staple Final Fantasy summons. You get your original Final Fantasy summons. You get all of them in this game. You get Ifrit, you get Shiva, you get Bahamut, you get, I mean, Garuda. I don't know if there was another Garuda in any other type of game, but you get your Wind Spirit, and then you get your Leviathan in your DLC, and you get your Odin. Those are like the main elemental, and you get Titan. And so like those are your main elemental forces, and Ramu. I keep missing one. So you get all of the main elemental forces of nature with water, wind, fire, ice, light, darkness, and you get earth with Titan. So you get all your major elements. So to me, I was just like, bro, like as a writer, as a person who's crafting a story, like if I had this long plan to make like 30 years worth of games, this would be my first one in the story. And then I would just build from there. So that was my theory behind it, and that's where I kind of like this game's a lot better than people are giving it credit for. Like the storytelling here is a lot better, and I like that it's open for interpretation because crazy people like me can do that. But I still think that it was a great story, but it's to me it's not. It doesn't have those Final Fantasy tropes that I'm used to. But because I came up with this theory, I can accept it a little better at the end.
So, so your idea then would be the thought process behind it would be in 2 years from now, we get a trailer at the Game of the Year awards, and it pops up Final Fantasy 16 Part 2, The Warriors of Light, and now it's a retelling of or a remake in essence of the first original Final Fantasy game, where we're restoring magic into the listen. If that happened, last 20 minutes of me shitting on Square Enix, they have to forgive me. Man, I would fucking come. I'm not gonna lie. Like if that happened, I would
so
be so
so not so like not to cut you off, right? But like I'm glad that you said that too, because it's like they haven't announced anything about Final Fantasy 17. Like they have not announced a single thing. And Final Fantasy 16 came out 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. And there's usually like little bits of information here. They haven't really said anything. So like what if like what we talked about before, what if like we talked about hitting the reset button. What if Final Fantasy 16 is the last entry that we get, and now the cycle starts over again? But Final Fantasy 16 bookends the first 30 years of Final Fantasy, and now that's the kicking off point.
there's
It
also
gives them the perfect like Thanos snap, like to reset everything and just be like, okay, we're just gonna start fresh now.
look, not to add to the conspiracy, but Final Fantasy 1 is the only Final Fantasy without a Cid. Um and so you don't have a Cid in the original Final Fantasy game. He didn't get introduced to Final Fantasy 2, I don't believe, right?
So in Final Fantasy One, there's no physical representation of Cid. Like there's no actual Cid character. But when you get the Rosetta Stone and you go to Elfheim and you have a conversation with the lady there, she tells you that Cid was the one who created the airship. That's it.
But in 16 it's Cid's daughter who creates the airship.
Correct.
So and also Clive is not. I mean, there's look, man. Clive took his name. I don't know. There's a lot there.
So after Clive dies, the daughter assumes the mantle of Cid now, and she's the one that made the first airship
That's really
for the
interesting.
Warriors of. So we're coming back now. We're going back full circle. Like they're coming back full circle. And the weird thing is that Final Fantasy 16, I believe, came out on was it the 35th year anniversary of the original game? Because the original game was 1987 here in America, right?
Let me
So I don't know. I mean, listen, if this is tinfoil hat stuff, but if they're thinking that, then they're like long term. That is like years down the road, long term planning, and I will bow at their feet forever if that's the case,
man.
because that's crazy. Like, dude, like, oh, you know what? This is gonna be our last one. We're gonna blow it up after this and just restart.
That
I'd be
would
like,
be to me that would be absolutely fascinating. And in essence, it would be because then where would it stop, right? So then now, are you going to give us a universe that is fully connected now? So like once we get a reboot, if you will, Final Fantasy, will Final Fantasy 2 then will they change stories or whatever to give us a universe that's connected? Because I will say, as much as I love the fact that every Final Fantasy game has its own different and unique story with just underlying tropes, I do find myself sometimes missing a connected universe that spans across several games, right?
yeah, yeah.
Because I didn't finish 13, so there's no fucking way I'm gonna go play 13.2 and 13.3.
Right.
And we have talked endlessly about the disappointment that was 10.2. So I
Yeah.
man, I that is truly, that is fascinating. I think we're gonna have to revisit this conversation again on a future episode, because that
So there's just one more thing I have to say real quick, just to give you another nugget here. So the other thing too is like in the last like 10 years, I guess it's fair to say that mass media, so like movies and like Hollywood, so I'm guessing MCU and even DCU with like the Flash, they've been obsessed with multiverse
yeah.
stories, right? So the way I look at it is, yes, Final Fantasy is an anthology series, but it can also just say they can also just come out and say, "Oh, it's just a multiverse story."
Mm-hmm.
So even though each Final Fantasy is its own separate story, it's still a part of this greater multiverse. So if 16 is the reset for the multiverse and they come out with their next Final Fantasy installment, wouldn't it be amazing if the next Final Fantasy game is the protagonist is able to jump in between worlds and solve this big issue, like this multiversal issue? Like,
That would
why
be
not? What's
yeah.
stopping them from doing that? And then he that kind of like Warriors of Light, like bringing the crystal back together, but like this multiversal traveler now is piecing the multiverse back together so it doesn't implode. And what led me to believe that too, like to get to there, was like the whole Final Fantasy VII Rebirth thing with like those spirits. Like there's clearly alternate timelines in Final Fantasy VII itself, and they're kind of like connecting to each other, and the spirits are trying to stop that. So like, what if that's what they're setting up? Like, what if they're setting up this huge multiversal crash together, and they need to stop that?
That's
I
fascinating.
I don't know.
I love that idea. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do an episode of the Phantom Files where we just talk about random Final Fantasy shit like this. I think
Hell yeah.
that sounds amazing. I wish I had gave my thought and theory for the ending of the game first, because it definitely is not near as good as yours is. Um, so
Oh, come on, let's hear it though. There's no such thing as a bad theory. Come on,
so
I want to hear
yeah,
yours.
so for me, okay, so I found it interesting that the title. So again, I just to set up. I'm sure if you're watching this again, you have played the game, but just in case if you haven't, post or excuse me, there's a post credit scene in Final Fantasy 16. So credits roll. Game ends. Clive is dead. Joshua's dead. Dion is dead. At least we presume that Dion is dead. I don't think we actually see him die, but but we assume he is. Um, and so credits roll. Then you get a post credit scene where it's these two kids that are playing outside, and one of them's asked by his mom to light a fire, and he says, I wish I could light it, like with the power of Ifrit, right, and the Phoenix or whatever. I don't remember what exactly he says, but basically he just wishes he has magic. Mom says, oh, you've been reading too much of that book. And then that's where you get the understanding that magic and that kind of stuff is all a fairy tale at this point, in where these
Mm-hmm.
kids are living and growing up from. So they go outside, they start playing, and they're playing as Clive and Joshua, and start playing out the book. And the camera pans back into the house, and you see a book laying on the counter. And it's the tale that we just went through of Final Fantasy 16, and it's authored by Joshua Rosfield. And I found it interesting that Joshua was the name on the book, because why what could ultimately be there's several ways that you could look at it. Maybe Joshua lived and wanted to tell the story, and he wrote it out. Maybe Clive lived because we see him go down, right, and you see Jill and Torgal howling at the moon and crying out. But I mean, in anything, does anyone really truly die? So maybe Clive wrote it, and then wrote it in under his brother's name and in honor of his brother. Maybe Dion wrote it, because Dion and Joshua clearly had a very close relationship, growing relationship in the game. Maybe Jill wrote it, but then why would Jill put it under Joshua's name? You would think if she was going to use a pen name, it would be Clive, right? So many so many different scenarios there. So mine is a little bit similar in the way of yours. We were talking about like they're looking at this book and it being um, you know, kind of fairy tale-ish. Not that the Bible's fairy tale-ish. Don't come at me. all the people
Yeah,
I
yeah.
keep hearing
We're
that.
not saying that at all.
Yeah.
We're not saying that.
20 years ago, I was going to be a preacher before I started being a multi-unit manager. So just get off
Yeah.
me for a second. Um, but I took the ending as everything we just experienced not being real at all. This was
Okay.
solely a fairy tale being told by an author named Joshua who put himself because this is Clive's story, clearly Clive's story. However, none of it happens without Joshua. Like we don't get
Correct.
anywhere without Joshua from his thought to be death at the beginning of the game to him being the phoenix and all that kind of stuff and the way he drove Clive to fulfill his destiny. And I found it interesting because of Joshua being the Phoenix. Phoenix are very iconic for rising from the ashes and
Sure.
reviving and things like that. I took it all as saying, okay, this was a great story, but it was just that. It was a story. And because of that, I felt more comfortable about some of the things that we were missing that wasn't Final Fantasy based because it felt like fan fiction to Final Fantasy is what it felt like.
Okay.
And so I took it as the story didn't actually happen. It wasn't real. It was just a story that Square Enix wanted to tell, in large part, just to be honest, because they were working on Final Fantasy VII, and they wanted to
Yeah.
get something out. But I did. I took it as the story actually didn't happen, and it was just written and authored by Joshua Rosfield. So which though then leads to what makes me wonder, okay, well, if it didn't happen and he was just the author, how old is this book? Because they don't really address that unless if you
Right.
believe that it did happen, then it had to have been thousands of years. It had to have been so far removed that people forgot about magic and magic being a real thing, which
Right.
is another theory you could have by the ending of the game. So either way, like the ending of the game did a great job of leaving things up for interpretation and for us to kind of wonder what actually happened, what we went through, and all that kind of stuff. Um, if they make a 16-2 and it's not down the road that you're going, which I love the way that you envisioned it, but if it's more practical in a sequel to this, I am telling you right now, Joshua, Clive, and Dion will all be back. None of them died. Like if they're actually making a real sequel to the game, I just
Yeah.
to me because there was too much of the underlying tones of religion there, and I think
Yeah.
that when you're looking at those three being the Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, I just to me it would make sense for all three of them to be back in a sequel to this game, but they're not making a sequel to this game either. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
No. Yeah.
The
No. For sure.
route you're going, but either way, I took it as like the game actually didn't happen. It was just a story of fiction, and I was okay with that. To be honest, I really was. And I'm okay with any of the way that they if they ever come out and say no, this is actually what the true ending was. I liked it all, man. I thought again, it wasn't a great Final Fantasy game, but it was a great game. It was a great story, and I did. I think if I don't put ratings on games, but I will say this is a must play. I think if you're just a video game fan in general, I think that this is a great story. Has a lot of really good tropes, great character development. Side quest aside, we didn't hit on that. I don't think you need to play a
Oh.
second side quest in this entire game.
So it's actually funny that you say that because the side quests in the beginning of the game are really bad. Like the side quests in the beginning of the game, they're all fetch quests except for like one or two. Um, but there's a point like after the second jump. So now like Clive is now Sid. He took the brand off of his face, so like now he's like the big main character. Like I think it's like a 5 year jump. Um, those side quests are they get a lot better, and there are some side quests that give you more like in-depth character development into like Jill and Joshua. So one of the side quests that you do is specifically a side quest that you do with Joshua, and he's in your party, and you do the side quest, and I forget like what you do, but like at the end of the side quest, they go back to like Clive's study, and they're having a conversation. Like him and Clive, or Joshua and Clive, are having a conversation, and it's like a very like offshoot thing. Like it's an offshoot comment, but Clive says something more along the lines of, "What are you going to do when this is all over?" And then he kind of just hits him with the, "I think I'm just going to sit down and write about everything that happened." So you get that, and you're like, oh. And then with the ending, it's like, oh, like maybe Joshua did write the book. Like maybe he really, like you said, Phoenix rise from the ashes. But it would have had to happen because, okay, so as soon as Clive destroys the Mother Crystal, all of magic stops, right? So Joshua would have had to have revived himself right before Clive beat Ultima, because once the Mother Crystal is destroyed, there's no more magic. So the basically like the dominance would no longer exist. So I mean, it's possible that Joshua could have risen like the Phoenix again before the Mother Crystal got blown up, but Clive is definitely dead. Dion is not dead, but again, because there's no more magic, they don't have Bahamut, they don't have Shiva, they don't have any of these things anymore. So there, and then there's another side quest that you do with Jill, and it gives you more insight into their relationship, and like how like she always looked at them as like brothers, but as they started growing older, she looked at Clive as something more. So there was always like that undertone of like, I can but I can't, because Jill was like kind of like, she wasn't of any nobility, and Clive and Joshua both were. So and then it for the most part, the side quests were ass, but there was maybe like 10 to 15 side quests that you could do like towards the end of the game that were really good. And then the hunts, like if you did the hunts, they were awesome.
I I don't know if I'll ever replay this game, but if I do, I probably will look at some of the side quests a little bit more. I think this game did a poor job, and again, we got to wrap up some point. So I'll make this last
Yeah.
point for me. um, the game did such a poor job of world building when it came to like an open
Yeah.
world type feel. Like everything was so
Yeah.
linear that it didn't make the side quests feel like they meant anything, because again, you didn't get to really explore much early on. It was just all very like, they were fetch quests like you had said.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the same issue that I had with Expedition 33. By the time I got to the third act of Expedition 33, no spoilers for that, but by the time I got to the third act there, I didn't feel like I needed to do side quests because of the way
Yeah.
the game had played out, and I missed a lot. Like there were some of the
Mm-hmm.
side quests in the third act were really meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think um, again, if Square Enix is going to continue down the path of making mediocre games, I would rather them just call it good so it doesn't tarnish what like I everything ever made as a cash grab. So I don't like calling things a cash grab. Like they're a company, they want to make money.
Sure.
Don't give us a shitty product, right? Like
Yeah.
give us something better. And I really hope that they do something different, gameplay mechanic wise, to push the story forward, push the gaming industry forward. But storyline wise, this game was a really good story, and
Yes.
I applaud the developers for that. And I think that if I was looking at a silver lining, just to close out this conversation of what they did to push the industry forward, which I think that they got lucky on this one. But I think it was your point at the beginning. The acting in this game was spectacular, and
Yeah.
I think that honestly, you I played Expedition 33 before I played Final Fantasy 16, but given
Mm-hmm.
the performance of Ben Starr, I don't know if he hadn't been Clive, would they have casted him as Verso in Expedition 33? And if not,
Probably not.
another actor had done what he did with Verso, because
Yeah.
shit, you needed a great actor to do what he did with Verso. So yeah, I think the acting was definitely at the top of the list. So closes out here, Dadman. Any last final thoughts on Final Fantasy 16?
Yeah, I mean, just go play it. I mean, it's not like a slog like the other Final Fantasy games, because it doesn't have like that traditional like grindiness to it. There's really not a lot of mandatory grinding. It's all optional. You could probably finish the game in like maybe 30 hours, which is not terrible. It's very linear. There's not a lot of like exploration. There's no getting lost in the game, and if you want, you could just fast travel everywhere. But I play games for the story, so the mechanics, whatever, I look past. The story is really good. I would definitely, as far as like stories are concerned, it's one of the better Final Fantasy stories. And like I said, with the advancements in technology and the quality of the acting, it's just very well put together. But don't go in there, expecting having high expectations. Just kind of temper them a little bit. And I think it's still enjoyable. I would definitely play this game because I think this is one of the Final Fantasies that like 10 years down the road will have like a big cult following, like Final Fantasy VIII. And I think that's fine. It's got a great story. The visuals are great. So I would definitely recommend playing it.
Yep, I agree. So the more important thing is, what do you guys think? Are you guys fans of the game? Did you think that Final Fantasy 16 was worth the play? Did you play it, and what were your overall thoughts? And most importantly, what did you feel about the ending? Did you think that this is going to set up for something bigger in the Final Fantasy universe, or do you think that maybe this was all made up and Joshua wrote himself a nice little story there? I think there's a lot there to be decided when it comes to the game and what direction you could go. And I would love to be able to hear your thoughts. So, listen, guys, I appreciate you taking time to listen to this podcast and this episode of the Loot Drop. If you've listened this long, it obviously is because you're either a really big fan of Final Fantasy or a big fan of us. I'm going to assume it's Final Fantasy, but I appreciate you listening either way. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to like and subscribe and share because, like we always say, good friends share shitty podcasts with good friends, and we want you to share our shitty podcasts to them. I will catch you guys again on the same Batman Drew time at the same Batman Drew channel. Thanks, guys.